what would it be like if you approached your fitness practice with zero expectation of a particular physical outcome because it had no effect on your physical outcome? And it was purely about what it does for you internally, how it affects how you experience life and your body and your mind and your emotions. What would you choose? Would you still choose to do that activity, number one? Or would you do something different that's more fun to you, or more exciting to you, or more uniquely challenging that speaks to you in a more cool, fun way? I think this is worth asking because I think it's true. I think it's worth asking, not because there's no physiological dimension to movement, obviously, but because there is such a huge dimension of the internal experience and how we are changed and affected by the activities we perform, that if we're taking for granted this whole hour, whether you train 3 hours a week or an hour a day or whatever, this is a massive chunk of your time in your life that you're spending doing something that is ostensibly for your benefit. But if in that time you're feeling like shitty, you're ruminating, you're not engaged with your body, you're going through the motions, you're worrying about your day, you're thinking about this because this movement and this activity really doesn't do it for you, then you're wasting your time. And you're missing out on what could be this incredibly beautiful, fun, illuminating experience that brings you more into harmony with the person that you are truly, with the person who expresses the talents, skills, virtues, and qualities that you want to express, that you want to embody. Physical movement practice is the chance to literally embody those virtues, qualities, identities, beliefs that you're striving for. So it's worth asking, is this modality conducive to the qualities and internal experience that is probably best for me to have right now? And if you don't know, then you might need to experiment a little bit. You might need to try different things. And I think that's just a good rule of thumb is experimenting with different modalities and experiencing your body in different ways will give you a different internal experience and introduce you to yourself in new ways. It'll provide more mirrors for yourself. So it's worth asking, what if fitness, exercise, had no effect on my body? Would I still do it? What I'm learning right now is that with strength training, with strength play, as I started kind of casually calling it, if it had nothing to do with my body, I would still do it. It would be inherently fun for what it does for me mentally and emotionally. Like, I don't go for walks in the park because I have to burn calories. I don't. Or because I have to get my steps in. I do it because it feels good, because it is a good experience to have that I enjoy. That is the only reason. And yeah, I can say, oh, well, I also know it's good for me to be outside and blah, 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 blah. Sure, duh. But that's really not my motivating thing. Which is not to knock that reasoning, but that's not why I do it. I do it because it feels good. I do it because it's enjoyable for me. And that's not to say that everything needs to be fun and enjoyable, because even that, what does that mean? There's a lot of different ways to have fun. But I guess what I'm speaking on right now is within fitness and movement, the type of engagement, self-physical engagement, that is inherently rewarding for what it does to you while you're doing it, for what that process is making you feel, what effect it's having on your mental state, on your energetic state. I experience strength training, gym time, as a practice where I can clean out energetically, like anxious, sort of knotted up thoughts and energy and frustration. A lot, not always, but most of the time, I go lift, and a lot of that just sort of works itself out and then helps me clarify my thoughts and elevates my energy level, elevates my mood, and all these sort of positive side effects. I obviously really like what it does do physiologically, or I should say what it enables physiologically. There's I have a whole other idea set that I am exploring about how much of our physiological visual adaptation, and visual I mean like literally what we see and physically experience of our bodies, how much of that has to do with also how our beliefs are impacting our activities. And I think it's a not small amount. So, but back to sort of the overarching point of this right here. If we can sort of ask ourselves, how would I approach this activity if it was purely about what it was doing for my mental emotional state? What would that change, if anything? And just taking that question with you into your process and just seeing what happens. Can you explore that question through how you move, through how you do things? Like if you're a strength athlete in like strength sports and you tend to like, I used to do this all the time. Every set, if I'm calculating my percentage and how much weight I should be lifting, I'm like, ooh, is this the right amount of weight that I should be doing to get this result? And if I don't do the right amount of weight, will I get the result that I'm trying to get? And like that sort of internal worry, fixation type thinking that is actually taking you out of the process of doing. So if you notice that in your movement practice, you're frequently being taken out of the process of doing by a thought story that has something to do with your external goals, you're separating yourself from the experience of what you're doing and cutting yourself off energetically from the benefit of that experience. It's so easy to be fixated on the external experience, right? Love the external experience. Love being a body. But when we're fixated on like some vague thing that we think we want, we're not in body. We're not in presence. We're not as sensate and grounded and in the present moment as we could be. We're going somewhere else, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there's a time and a place for that. If you want to do a deep dive on like your goals and how you think you're going to get there, don't do that while you're lifting. Your lifting, your exercise is for the presence of that experience. And also not to say that you shouldn't like think anything at all. I get a lot of creative thinking done actually when I lift. That's like, I get very philosophical. I think about stuff like this. I'm like writing notes between sets. But when I'm actually like doing the movement, I try to think of nothing. I try to release as much as I can. And some movements lend themselves, like if I'm going for a walk, that's a different type of movement. It's a different type of experience, but I digress. I'm very curious in general what the effects of approaching fitness as a mental, emotional, yet still very embodied process, what that looks like. I'm curious about what happens when we go into it with no expectation, or shall we say expectation that has more to do with being present in our own process, an expectation of the immediate outcome of that session, that okay, I expect when I go to the gym that I am going to come out better than when I went in. That is the main expectation I carry. I'm going to come out feeling more grounded, more present, more energized, more positive. Everything else, my numbers-based goals, my performance-based goals, those still exist, but they are not the main focus for me right now. And I'm not saying that this framework, like, that this is the right framework that everyone should have. Like, don't get it twisted. But so much of everything is so hyper, like, so much of, like, fitness mainstream culture and how we talk about our training it's always talking about, like, the details and the minutia of controlling specific inputs and outputs for this long term. If you're trying to do this, then you need to do this. And what I'm getting at is really flipping the script on all of that. And, you know, having a general idea of the type of what your goals are, and maybe even a very specific idea. Maybe a very specific idea. It's not about not having a goal. But what if the way to get to that goal has more to do with embodying the version of you that already is that thing, that already has that outcome, and embodying it through your physical practice by using that presence and that movement to shift and ease you in to an energetic, emotional, mental state that is closest to the person that you want to be. And to me, that is the most fascinating, the most interesting, exciting way to look at fitness. Right now, for me, where I'm at with what I'm doing. Let me know what you think about these ideas. Let me know if you experiment with these ideas. I think this way of approaching things, again, I've talked about a lot of sort of broad perspective shifts. And so you don't need to change anything that you're literally doing in your program or your routine to necessarily shift this approach. Maybe it has something to do with simply lessening the importance of the details and focusing more on generating that internal state, confidence, strength, forthrightness, positivity, whatever states you feel are most conducive to that long-term goal. And also most conducive to being the best you right now. Because that's the other kicker. All right, this is my closing statement. There is only right now. The future does not exist. There's only right now. The past and the future exist. Or I'm getting way out of my depth here right now. But my point is, any future that we're thinking about is one that we are imagining and creating in our imagination. So, and what is real is right now. Right now. So in my right now, in the gym, when I'm in the gym in like an hour, I'm going to focus on making that right now as good as it can possibly be. With my goals vaguely in mind, but not hyperfixating on them in the moment. I'm going to focus on making that moment as good as it can be, because that is what is going to ripple out in time and space in my body and affect things. All right, let me know what you think. Drop a comment. I'm just like freewheeling and experimenting with some ideas right now. And I would love to hear if you experiment with this, how this affects how you approach your training. Have an amazing, amazing day.